All right, welcome everybody to the Phys Ed Summit 2.0. I'm William Bode, and I'm in somewhat chilly Charlotte, North Carolina. Some of my counterparts on the screen have much colder weather than I do, but I'm thankful to be in a nice warm house. And a couple of housekeeping things. I hope that you're going to follow us on today's meet. The link was in your conference program. And if you have any questions for our roundtable that you want to discuss, please feel free to ask those there, and I will pass them along to the rest of the roundtable. Looks like we have an error for this one. Already got an error. Great. What type of error, I wonder? Okay. All right, so it looks like we're good now. All right, so thank you. Just following along on our today's meet, and just again, it's all live, and we do the best that we can. But a little bit about what we're doing today is this is technology. We are all doing this on our own time, sharing our knowledge and expertise for free for the PE community to grow stronger. So I thank all our participants today that are here live on the Hangout, as well as those that are out watching the presentation. This is our second Phys Ed Summit, and we're glad that you're joining us. If for any reason the video gets lost or cut, just hang out with us for a minute. We will definitely get you back. Go to the conference program to get the new link. But so far, we've done pretty well with not getting hit with the technology bug. We want to thank Spark PE. They are sponsoring the Phys Ed Summit 2.0, and they are so gracious to offer some prizes for those that fill out the survey at the end of the broadcast today. And some of the things that they're giving out is a Spark Dance DVD, a digital physical education program, a Summer Institute registration, and a $150 gift certificate to Spark Store. So really thankful that Spark has been able to come alongside and support us, and hopefully motivate some of y'all folks to fill out those surveys at the end. Also, I hope that you enjoyed the first block session. A lot of great information that has been archived on the Physedagogy website for later viewing, because there's so many good ones. We know we can only watch one at a time. If you need PD hours, filling out the survey at the end will also we'll send you an email with a certificate. All right, I think I got most of my housekeeping things in order. So what I want to do now is I want to introduce my esteemed colleagues in the high school world, and I'm just going to click onto their screen, and I'm going to let you give them a brief introduction. All right, Adam.
Hello, my name's Adam Llevo. I'm currently teaching in Saudi Arabia, and before that I was teaching in China, also 5 years in England at a sixth form college. I currently teach K through 12, and this is my 8th year of teaching. The technology I use in high school PE, a mixture, and I'm sure we'll discuss all the different things we use in today's meet.
All right, thanks, Adam. Eric.
Hello, I teach in Los Angeles, California, and I've been teaching for about 18 years, and right now I'm in a different situation than a lot of people. I teach at a performing arts school where kids aren't into sports as well, so it's different. I have about 55 students per class, so hopefully I can really relate to those bigger class sizes.
All right, thanks, Eric. All right, Joe.
Hi, I've been teaching for 18 years. I teach in Western Wisconsin at DeSover Senior High School. Before that, I started teaching in England and then taught several years in Hong Kong as well. And I'm a 10 through 12 high school.
Wow. All right. Thank you. All right, Charlie.
Hi, my name is Charlie Rizzuto. I teach on Long Island in New York. I teach 7 through 12 PE. I teach a specialized sport and fitness class that has a differentiated equipment curriculum than a regular PE class, and I've been teaching for 4 years now.
Ooh. All right. So you see, we have just a great wide variety of folks here from all over the world that will be sharing with us today. And you know, I've always talked about high school really needing to come together, and coming together with the intent of hopefully strengthening the best practices within the secondary level. So, you know, with that said, I think that you're really going to enjoy your presentation today, and I'm going to share my screen. And as I share my screen, I'm going to flip through some slides, and each presenter is going to be able to just kind of talk about how they assess as far as pre-assessments, self-assessments, peer assessments, and formal assessments at the end of units and the semester. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get going. All right, so as you can see, we're going to follow along with the Google slide presentation, and we've kind of gone through our introductions. Let's get there. There we go. So our first question, and Joe, we're going to start with you. Now, where do you begin with assessments?
The first thing is, I always start with the end in mind. What am I hoping my students are going to be able to know and be able to do by the time that we're finished with a particular unit of study or concept? So I look at the standards, I look at the grade level outcomes. I've pinpointed within each different curriculum area which standards I'm going to be most focused on. So, for example, I teach 3 different classes at the high school. I have a Fitness for Life class, which is core, and a Cardio Fit and Adventure Ed. So obviously the focus in each class is slightly different, and the grade level outcomes are slightly different for each one. So once I've looked at that and decided what I'm going to focus on and what my learning outcomes are, then I look at how I'm going to measure those learning outcomes and go from there. And I build it around that. So the actual activities and content are kind of the last piece of the puzzle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Adam.
Yes, sir. So what I've started to do this year is I've started to use some solo taxonomy, and those that don't know anything about solo taxonomy, there's basically 5 levels of learning. So there is a pre-structural stage where people don't know anything. There is one thing, so the unistructural stage, so they know one thing. Multi-structural, they'll know 3 things. Relational, they know all these 3 things, but they can relate them together. And then the extended abstract phase. So if you were watching Marcus's one on the GAF, I use something very similar. So to the right, you can see every one of my students in the middle school, high school has a fitness report, and this gets pushed out to through Google Classroom, and then each student will fill this in, and then using DocAppender, if you look at the bottom right, I will give them a Google form, and that will tell me where they're up to in their learning at the moment, or what knowledge they have about different subjects. And then from that I can use that information to base on obviously the next few weeks and how it's going to go.
Great. All right, let's go to Erin.
I start out kind of like the same way as Joe does. I look at the standards, see what unit we're going into. But then as far as pre-assessment goes, I do just a lot of observing, a structured observing. I'll say, okay, let's go play this activity and see what they do well at. And then, so if they're all doing pretty well, I know I don't have to teach that specific concept. Then I do a lot of questioning as well. So for instance, I just finished a golf unit with my 9th graders, and I simply asked how many of you have ever played golf, and like 2 out of 50 kids raised their hand. So I know I have to teach pretty much the whole range of the activity.
Super. All right, Charlie.
So much like Eric and Joe, I look at the standards and learning outcomes. And when I start with my pre-assessment, I want my students to show me as much as they possibly can. And I also want them to discuss as many different concepts as we can. So as an educator and as a teacher, I can figure out where they are and where we need to go from there, aligned with learning outcomes and the standards. So a couple of different techniques that I use is the first day of a new unit will be a play day. So they'll get into a game pretty much right away after we talk about some safety concerns and some basic rules, so I can see where they are, but also so they can kind of figure out where they are in terms of the skill sets that we're going to be learning throughout the unit. Another thing that I do is I have them fill out a self-evaluation sheet, maybe at the end of the play day, but before anything is taught. And on the sheet, I linked a Google Doc to another slide coming up because I'm going to reference the sheet later on also. But they basically have a chart that lists the skills that we're going to be learning throughout the course of a unit. Some may change depending on the responses that I get. And they tell me where they feel they are in a pre-assessment stage before we really learn or they have an opportunity to practice any skill. And then later on in the unit, they get those sheets back and have an opportunity to elaborate on it. And just like Eric, I'll use class discussions and some question and answer to figure out, have they played this before? In what capacity have they played it? How comfortable are they in those games or in those activities? Or I'll throw out a concept and just see what I get back. And based on what they give me back, I can kind of gauge where they are in terms of the concept being associated with whatever it is we're about to learn.
Great. So you see, as we really break down what everybody's doing, one, we look at the standards, and two, we figure out where our kids are at in order to measure learning. And so, that's whether you're in Saudi Arabia, you're in California, it's all across the globe. Best practice is best practice. And hopefully by sharing this and creating a good foundation for the teachers out there, that you can do it in a class of 55, or you can do it in a class of 13, which, sorry guys, I have a class of 13. So it works from one side to the other. And so I hope that everyone out there will be able to see that good practice is good practice. And so let's move on to our next question. And I need to check see what the next question is.
Bode, can I add one thing in there before the next question?
Please do.
One thing that I think, Adam kind of hit on this a little bit with solar taxonomy, but one thing that I think is very important is that students need to know it's okay where they are on their learning continuum. All of our students come in with various amounts of knowledge, and to let them know if you know nothing about any concept, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. That's where you're starting from. That's where you're going to grow to. So making sure it's about a student as an individual, not any comparisons to anybody else. So start where you're at. Not knowing anything is fine. The point is that you are going to grow through whatever progression that you're doing, so that you can demonstrate understanding.
Definitely. Thanks, Joe. So as we move along, so we talked about pre-assessments and getting in and figuring out where our kids are at and where we're starting. So within a unit, within a semester, what are some of our ongoing assessments that you use in your classroom? And so, Charlie, will you start us off there? Oop, Charlie, we can't hear you. All right, I'll let you. You got it?
Hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. So I have a few different techniques that I use. I've listed some of them there. So I like to use video analysis a lot for summative assessment and also for ongoing assessment. So one of the techniques that I use, a lot of times in phys ed we talk about engaging the non-participant. So if I have a student that is maybe not changed that day for whatever reason, a way that I can incorporate video analysis into ongoing assessment and class discussion is they would become the coach for the day, and they would take video of the game that we're playing, and more specifically the team that they're the coach of, and find good clips of whatever the concept is we're discussing that day. So for example, a couple of weeks ago we were creating and utilizing space in a game. So she took 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clips, however many she had to take until she found one good one. And then at halftime, I spoke to the class, gave my opinions, and created some discussion. And then the two teams went with their coaches, and she used video analysis to show from the student's perspective her team opportunities where they did a really great job about creating or utilizing space, and some opportunities or situations where they could have maybe created a better opportunity. So as I listen to the class discussions and how that one student is presenting the information and the feedback that her teammates or her players in that situation are giving to her, I can gauge how well they're grasping the concept. I also like to use some peer teaching, so I'll incorporate choice into a unit and give the students some choices of some different activities. And as the teacher, I try to find as many concepts or skills that will relate to the choices that we're giving. And at the end of the class, so say one group was talking about open space and another group was talking about moving off ball or utilizing some different techniques. At the end of the class, I'll have group A talk to group B about a concept that they could also use in their game that they were practicing that day. And again, through that discussion, I could gauge how well they internalize the concept. I'll also use things like daily challenges. A lot of people use exit tickets. I use those as well. And the self-assessment sheets kind of come into play at this point also. So as I discussed previously, before a unit starts, they'll kind of gauge where they feel they are before we learn anything. And then throughout the course of a unit, they'll get those sheets back from time to time to continually assess, and they'll pick one skill or one concept that they feel that they're finding improvement in. And they'll just answer some questions and talk about the way that they're seeing improvement, how they really felt before it started, how they feel now. And there's a link at the bottom of this slide that'll take you to a Google Doc that has that form that I use on it, or a variation of that form that I use. And it also has a scenario on page 2 on how I'll try to induce some good discussion between my class in terms of a peer teaching conversation where during a choice one group will learn one thing that can transfer over to the other group, and they'll discuss it at the end and teach each other the concepts that they were going over that day in their game.
So Charlie, I have a question on today's meet. Do you find that the Common Core in PE comes into play with more written assignments? If so, how are you assessing it?
Yeah, so I do, and I feel like depending on the district, emphasis on the Common Core varies a little bit, but everybody is talking about it. I remember years ago I had a demo lesson somewhere, and the feedback I got was the demo lesson was great, but my students didn't write enough. So it definitely is out there. So a couple of the ways that I use the Common Core, and we could just talk about writing in PE, is when they fill out the self-evaluation sheets, they're writing a little bit, they're expressing, but I also use extended instruction, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in summative assessment. But I have a blog on my website, and my students go there and they'll answer questions from the day, so we don't take class time for them to write in class. They do it at home or during an off period during the school day. And I'll also throw out some scenarios when we talk about the different domains and touching upon the affective domain in physical education, where they'll write some lengthy, sometimes shorter blog responses to some different ideas or concepts or questions that I'll throw out them. So the writing that they do in my class during class time is short, it's brief, but I do get them writing. The majority of the writing that they do is at home in these extended instruction blogs, and I read them. Sometimes I'll sit down with an English teacher to kind of go over how they're writing, what their writing style is, and we don't spend a lot of time breaking down the writing style, but I will print out the blogs and make some little comments and give them back to them, which at times is weird for me because I'm not an English teacher, but I do want to approach and hit on the Common Core, and I do want them writing in class, so that's kind of how I go about it.
Great, thanks. So let's move on to, I think that answered the question, and the link will be posted on the conference program once we finish up. So, Adam, we're going to send you to solo taxonomy land. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so like Joe said, this is something that I got hooked on last year, and I wasn't in the place to be able to implement it successfully, but now I am. It really is helping with the students' learning. So students can see where they are now and where they are either at the end of the lesson, during the lesson, and all the skills are broken down. So if you look at the top picture, they will be able to see basically criteria for each skill or each sport. And then I will ask them to where they think they are at the moment. Now, no, there's very few people that can be excellent at everything. And I think as PE teachers, we need to make that across. Some people have higher egos that think, yeah, I'm an extended abstract for literally every sport. But we need to say that it's difficult. We have very few that are going to be up there. So how we do it, I use some of the stuff that Charlie was talking about. We use the video analysis. We use 3Ring to be able to put some portfolio stuff together. But we use Google Forms and Docapender. And if you look at this, this was done as part of a cricket unit. And the middle picture shows, ask them what they thought they were at for a certain thing. So for example, in cricket, what they were at catching. So they either knew one thing, either know nothing, one thing, three or more things. They know how to connect all the coaching points and be able to describe and explain them. And this is where solo taxonomy takes that right into that next level. So they can analyze, they can evaluate. So what I asked was, when they fill this Google form out, this then gets put to their actual report. So each student has their own report, and then it gets added to this. So for every time they'll have a lesson, they will complete this as a quick homework, a quick exit ticket, and they can just write a little reflection, and part of that reflection then goes towards their final grade. So I've spoke to different people and they say participation is part of their grade. Well, how much percentage are you putting on that grade? Because really for me it's a prerequisite. So if you start to think of maths, science, do they turn up with a pen or a pencil? I hope so, because if they're not, then maybe there's something wrong with your teaching. So how are you going to start controlling about, are they participating? Are they turning up with their kit? For me, that's a prerequisite in PE. So we need to start thinking, how are we going to assess in other means? And this way we're allowing kids to see. If you look at the top left picture, they may initial, draw a symbol, where they think they are in their learning at the moment, and then they can move up. And then as a facilitator, I can question them, I can see ask them why they think they've moved up, and check that understanding a lot more.
Awesome, and I think, yeah, if those of you that haven't looked at solo taxonomy as a teaching model, it involves so many good things that we don't have enough time to explain it all, but I think you're going to get bits and pieces of that throughout this presentation. So Joe, your turn.
Okay. I'm kind of similar with Adam, whereby I'm constantly asking the students to reflect on what it is we're learning. On the left-hand side there, it's one of the reflection logs that my students have for different fitness activities. Each Friday in one of my classes, we do a different fitness group class type activity, with the idea being, at the high school level, we are kind of like the last stop before our students are out and on their own in terms of being physical activity and health consumers. So my goal is to try and get them as informed as they possibly can be. So they experience different fitness class, and after that I'm expecting them to apply some of the concept knowledge we've covered in terms of overload, frequency, intensity, time and type, and then personally reflect as well, how did this work for me? It's very easy for students to just, as Adam said, participation is a prerequisite, but all of us could go and do something and then leave without really thinking about the process and what we've done and what we're gaining from it. This way, they're reflecting, saying, well, why does this work for me? Could I see this as something I'm doing in the future? You know, taking that time to do their personal reflection. Anything that I'm doing from a written perspective, it's either going to be at home or it's going to be a few minutes at the end of a class period. I'm not expecting a lot, but I am expecting evidence that, you know, they're meeting standard 5, that they're valuing physical activity, and they know how to challenge themselves to make improvements. The link to the action research plan that you can see there, that's something that one of my classes did. They chose their own action research project, so they had to pick an idea that related to health, physical education, wellness, and come up with a rationale as to why they wanted to do this research, create a plan. Where I used like a science experiment methodology, so they had to have a reason behind it, a rationale, a hypothesis, a method. They had to collect some information, like show how they were doing it. It could have been, some students did a video log, some did a presentation, some kept different types of logs, and then, you know, what did they find out and how was it going to help them personally in the future. The other assessment that you can see there, the visual pictures, this is another use of solo taxonomy, kind of similar to what Adam said. The picture on the left-hand side was my students as we were beginning looking at the health-related components in fitness and their application, and each student had a little post-it with their initials on, and they assessed where they were at. And like Adam, you know, if they want to, as we progressed 2 weeks later, you can see that a lot of those post-its have moved up. But at the same time, I still wanted my students to be able to justify why they were moving up. So I am now on level, the relation level, because I can take these components and I can apply them in a wide, different range of contexts and see how they link to each other. So they're taking their thinking, their learning to the next level. Because it's not just I'm here, I'm in this one zone in school, and that's where it's going to apply. They have to be able to take their knowledge and use it in everyday life.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. All right, Eric, you're up, buddy.
Sounds good. For me, ongoing assessment, I like to use a teaching for games for understanding model. I've been learning about that over the last year and a half, and I've tried to incorporate it into my classes because I really like the discussions that I have with the students in small groups as they are playing the games, and seeing what they can do to make the game better or make their skill better. But I also just love the idea of exit tickets, and usually, if you can see my sample up there, I love Twitter, and so I've just learned so much on Twitter, so I've tried to incorporate it into class. And you can see that there's some lead-up questions for the kids there, so they're not just having to guess what to write, but I tell whatever topic we're discussing at the time, they just at the end of the class, I hand out the exit tickets real quick. They fill out their exit tickets, then they go to change. And it's a really great way to see where the kids are at, see if I'm teaching what I'm supposed to be teaching. And if they're not understanding the concepts, then I know I need to go back and do some reteaching. And then along with Adam and Joe, I've started using Solo a little bit. I've done small introductions with my classes, and they seem to be grasping the concept well. They like seeing on the charts where they're at and where they're able to go just by participating in class.
Awesome. So you see that Solo is starting to be used, teaching games for understanding. It's just a great, finding a good model that, based upon the standards, really helps. It helps you as the instructor. It helps the kids, and I really like, our discussion on ongoing assessments, because we need to constantly know where kids are. Has been repeated several times throughout each of your presentations. It really helps the kids. I even think it helps develop a relationship with the kids, because you're asking them questions. You're getting them to critically think, where am I in the continuum of learning? So we got our pre-assessments. That really helps the student and the teacher know exactly where our starting point is. The ongoing assessments, and where are we on that continuum of learning, which kind of moves us towards formal assessments, those ending assessments that as we start to finish up a unit or finish up a semester, trying to do two things at once is hard, gets us ready for hopefully evaluating the ending point of where that student is. So with that said, Joe, I'm going to let you take over the next set of questions and post-assessments.
Okay, I have two examples on there. Now, I mentioned on the right-hand side the Action Research Project. This was something that, again, my students came up with their idea. They came up with their proposal, submitted it to me, and I had a look over it and said, right, how are you going to do this? Have you thought about the nuances and all the different factors that you're going to have to consider with your project? And once we'd chatted and I'd said, yes, you're good to go, then they went away, worked on their project, I checked in with them. But they had their rubric ahead of time. I think that's important. You know, the students need to know how they are being assessed. Otherwise, it's like getting in the car and driving aimlessly. You have no idea where you're going or how you are, you know, what your target is by the time that you're done. So make sure they have that information up front. So even if they're not there at the beginning, they can see where they're hopefully trying to get by the time that we're done. So for each different grade level outcome or unit or concept, there is a rubric or some description that the students have that says, this is what I'm looking for in your understanding, in your performance. On the left-hand side, I have one from a climbing unit. So the top one is about belaying. So initially, most of the students don't have a clue about being a primary belayer or the roles of the belay teams. So we're obviously practicing and so on, and we get to a point where they are seamless with it. And then they, once there's, the minimum expectation is that they have to be seamless with it because safety is on the line, obviously. And then, but from there on upwards, it's like, that would be a multi-structural level. From there on upwards, it's that you actually understand each role in the belay team and how they all work together to create this safe environment for the climber. And it is ongoing and it's daily, but it's still a formal assessment because it needs to be done every single day once that initial learning period is done. And the last part is that they are demonstrating support of their peers and their teamwork. So someone's climbing a little bit too quickly, then the belayer tells them, you need to slow down. That communication piece is there, that checking of the team. Everyone's working as a unit. So that's one way, and that would be more of an ongoing formal assessment thing, whereas the Action Research Project, they complete their project, they turn it in, and then it's like, right, have we met these criteria, yes or no? And the other thing is, if they haven't, you have a deadline. If a student has missed the point, then does that mean there's a line in the sand that's done? Not always. I know we have an end point. Certainly the high school level, they're going to leave, they're going to graduate, the semester's going to end, so there is an end point. But if that time is still there, and at 4 weeks into the semester, a student's demonstrated, a B-level knowledge, or then as the semester's progressed, they've stepped up and they're like, oh, now I get this, then that's where they are at the end. I don't know how many of you have seen how to pack a who would you like to pack your parachute analogy, but it shows a graph of 4 different people packing parachutes. One person starts off and they're excellent, then they're not very good, then they're okay, and they're not good. And another person who's packing it starts off not doing it very well, but makes improvement to mastery by the time it's done. I think that's what we're aiming at more than anything. At the end of that unit, are they getting towards mastery, or can they demonstrate it? And that can also be, and this was a question on today's meet, it can be demonstrated in several different ways. If I have a beginning swimmer, they are not going to master all of the strokes within a 2 or 3 week unit. It's not going to happen. But they can still demonstrate growth for themselves personally, and they can still demonstrate understanding of what they should be doing as they progress as a swimmer, with their breathing, their leg action, their arm action, their body position, and their timing.
Great. All right, Charlie, you're up. Charlie, you hear me?
Yeah, am I back?
Yep, you're back.
Okay. Sorry, I lost you guys there for a second.
No problem.
So in the summative assessment and the post-assessment, there's a few different things that I use, and I completely agree with what Joe said. Your students need to know how they're going to be assessed at the end, whether you give them a rubric at the beginning or you just kind of explain what the end is going to look like. So I've touched upon a few of these already, and I'm going to differentiate a little bit how I use them during ongoing assessment or the summative assessment. So if you look at video analysis during the ongoing assessment phase, I'll take some clips and we'll discuss it as a class. I love class discussion, and I know I've said that a few times, but my principal gave us a really good analogy a while ago, and when you engage your students in class discussion, the way that they could scaffold off each other and build off each other's ideas, it really increases the level of engagement. So he gave me, or the whole school, a really good analogy, and it fits in phys ed because it has to do with activity. You want to try and have your lessons look like a game of volleyball rather than a game of ping pong. So if I have a question and you look at ping pong, I hit it over the net and they give me an answer back and then it stops. But if you think about volleyball, I serve the ball over the net and they pass it around for a little while and then send it back to me. You're increasing the level of engagement. So I love using question and answer in certain scenarios. It fits. But I also like throwing an idea out and have them discuss it before they send it back to me. So when I use video analysis, in ongoing assessment, I try to approach it in that way. But for the summative assessment, what I'll do is I'll take a student or sometimes a team, depending on whatever it is we're trying to assess, and I'll pull them to the side. And Joe has said this before, that sometimes if your units are only 5 weeks long, like mine are most of the time, how much improvement in terms of a physical skill, will you really be able to see? So sometimes for me, it's more important that they understand the concept of the skill or what the skill should look like. So when I take video analysis, I'll break it down with that student, and I'll ask them 2 simple questions. What would you like to keep, and what would you like to change, based on the rubric and what we're learning in terms of the skill? So they'll watch themselves perform a skill, and then they'll tell me, I really like, or I want to keep where I made contact with the ball or my foot placement or whatever the case may be, and I'd like to change X, Y, and Z. And then when they tell me why they want to change it, if it fits the rubric and the teaching cues and whatever it is we're trying to learn, then that's a good assessment. They'll score high on that assessment because that's what I'm looking for. If we're trying to teach 7 or 5, 6, whatever it may be in a short period of time, different skills or skill sets or concepts, you can't expect mastery in all of them, so I don't feel you could grade them in that way. But if they can conceptualize and understand what it should look like, then to me that's a home run. They just need more practice time to be able to perform it consistently. So before, I also mentioned the affective domain in terms of blogging, and I'm going to touch on that really quickly. So I try to, if I'm doing a volleyball unit, so I'll have like a peripheral unit, which will be goal setting or respect or leadership. And that piece of it, I'll give like a at-home blog for the students in extended instruction to discuss. So I gave a project one time, very simple: do professional athletes make too much money? And they had to respond to each other's posts at least 3 or 4 times. I forget what it was. And the whole point to that was respecting someone else's point of view. So we discussed it in class, and then to assess it in not attacking the person, but kind of addressing their argument on whether or not you agree with them and how you go about it. Kind of hits that affective domain and incorporates the Common Core in writing. But I love performance-based assessment. I want students to show what they've learned, not necessarily always just tell what they learned or write about what they learned or answer questions based on what they learned. And oftentimes in phys ed, we look at performance-based assessment as a simple skill set or a skill assessment. So one of the projects that some of you may have heard me discuss before in different capacities is my Train Your Teacher project, and I have a Google Doc there with a little starter kit for the project. And in that project, what the students had to do was, we learned about the sport fit model and different fitness concepts and different types of muscle fibers. So they were linked up with a teacher in the building, and they interviewed that teacher based on that teacher's previous fitness experience and their fitness goals. And then they took a couple classes to practice a routine as they designed a routine specifically for that teacher, and then the teachers came back and they trained them and they put them through that routine. That project did a lot of different things, but for me it was a performance-based assessment on the students' understanding on how to implement different exercises that they've learned and fitness concepts that they've learned, and it added some value to them because they were looking at it from a different perspective. They were looking at it through the eyes or the goals of somebody else, rather than themselves, and it gave them a different and a unique perspective on how to approach the things that we were learning in class. So those are three of the techniques that I really like to use. I love video analysis as a summative in terms of students looking at themselves, and they may not master a skill, but they could verbalize what mastery would look like, or what they would like to change if they had more practice time. And projects like performance-based assessment, or like the trainer-teacher project, or I have some of my classes, again, on the fitness realm, make fitness videos, and then we create QR codes, and we put posters up in the weight room for people who are using the weight room to scan the QR codes, and now that's alive. That assessment becomes alive because other people can use it to learn from it, and it becomes real time in its transfer, like Joe was speaking about before.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. All right, Eric, you're up.
All right. For my summative assessments, I start out like everyone else. I go back to what the standard says, and I look at the rubrics that I gave to the students, and I try to. This is going to probably hopefully help the teachers with the larger classes a little bit. I don't ever have time to grade all the standards that we are giving, whether they're the national standards or state standards. So I really try to break it down to the thing that I think is most important, and I pull that standard out. And so that way the instruction and the learning is super focused, and the kids know exactly what they're supposed to be learning. And so if you look at that little Google form there on my page, that you can see I just finished up a golf unit with my freshmen, and all they were supposed to do was be able to combine simple movement patterns into complex movement patterns. And so I did that with just the golf swing. That's all they were assessed on, even though we talked about golf etiquette, we talked about the different types of clubs and what they were used for. They were only really assessed on that one small part of the standard 1.1 for the California standards, combining those simple movement patterns into complex movement patterns. And I think that will make grading large classes, like I have about 55, a ton easier and a lot less stressful on me. So realize that even though there's a lot of standards there, you don't have to necessarily in 1 year grade all those standards together.
Awesome. Great. All right, Adam, you're up, buddy.
Nice. Okay.
I'll get to you in a second. There you are.
Okay, so for me, teaching, one of the things one of my professors once said is teaching PE, you have to have these different hats. Hats for questioning, hats for using technology, hats for showing the skills, all these different hats, and we have to try and give as many different opportunities to our students as possible. And I know different people have been talking about technology, and for me, a way of showing technology is using different styles. So like, if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, there is a flu brew. So I gave them, as part of one of their assessments, a quick quiz on the rules of whatever sport I was looking at. If people don't know about flu brew, basically they'll use a Google form. They will then add to the Google form, answer it, and then this will mark it for them and send out their result to them. It will tell them what they've got wrong, what percentage they got, and if they want to redo it. So a very quick, easy way if you want to check any sort of basic, shallow understanding. William, can you just click that link that's at the bottom? Will it let you? Go to link. Go just a bit below. Oh. All right.
Yeah, I see it. My bad.
Basically, it doesn't matter if you can't. All that is there we go. These are verbs from solo taxonomy. So we were talking on the back channel about how we assess our students, and something about this is, yes, someone might be able to do the skill really well, but can they tell you about it? Can they go into that little bit more depth? Do they have that deeper level of understanding? So if someone says, yes, I'm an extended abstract athlete because they're really good at soccer or football, but can they do the skill? So if I ask them, can they explain a pass, but they only define what a pass is, they use the side of the foot, they're not an extended abstract. So maybe through questioning I can say, are you sure, or through peer assessment. So using these key words helps to extend the writing and the speaking. Now, English is an additional language at my school, so using these different concepts, students have been able to go into a little bit more depth. If you just go back, William, to the actual slideshow. So here I set up a Google form. The students have given what they think they are. For example, we were doing cricket, what they were doing catching and throwing. Then on Google Forms, you can set up that it's a pre-filled URL. So I started the sentence off for them, and then the picture on the right is what got amended using the doc appender, what they wrote, so how they felt about it. And then I can then add comments to that in their report. So they're showing a level of understanding. So throughout the unit, they can reflect on where they were at the beginning and then where they were at the end of the unit.
So as we start to wrap up a little bit, this is a lot of information, and I hope that those out there watching now and in the future will continue to reference not only the slides but our conversations, because I know Adam, Joe, and I we've used solo taxonomy. Adam a lot longer. He introduced it to me, but it takes time to implement the good practices. It can be very overwhelming, and you can think, oh, that's too much. But I think if you take one piece at a time and start with Google Forms, I think we all mentioned Google Forms. We take Google Forms and we learn the value and the data that it gives us. Great for pre, great for ongoing, and great for post-assessments. Gives you a lot of information, and it's very simple to create and simple to distribute, and it's quick, very efficient. So you start with that piece, and then you start building little by little. I found that that's really beneficial to helping you implement best practice, because we need to assess more. It helps the kids, it helps us, it helps administration, it helps teachers, because it gives us all this data in which we can show that learning is being taking place in our classrooms. So I'm going to go to today's meet. Adam, do y'all see any questions that we need to hit?
I've been trying to hit them on the back channel as we've been going through.
Yeah, I see that.
A big one for me, people were talking about blogging. If they're not too sure, Justin Slider and Nick Enlick introduced me to this, was Kid Blog, and a good way, a safe way of people obviously allowing their kids to blog and go into a little bit more detail. But for me, by having the way that I have my report set up, I can literally type in the student's name on my Google Drive, and it will allow me to bring up their report straight away, and then I can add comments to it that way. So if you didn't want to put things on the internet, you could keep it all within a Google Drive.
Right, for sure. Joe?
We just had another question on there about high school teachers. Do you incorporate responsible behaviors into all units or a standalone unit? Because I mean, that for us comes under, certainly in the US, under Standard 4, that a student can exhibit personal and social responsible behaviors in PE and health. I've done a combination of those two things, certainly in my adventure ed class, where it is a huge part of it. I do have an initial unit where, and I think in most classes, most of us have got our get to know you style, work with different people, and understand and appreciate everyone's strengths, and also where they need help as well. So I think that ongoing teaching of respect and responsibility, maybe hit it up front. Well, I hit it up front first, but it needs to be a common theme. One great resource and I'll try and get this posted in the presentation. There's a book. Oh my goodness me, my brain's going now. By Greg Burt and Lisa Summers, and it has an awesome concept of spirit of the game. We've actually turned that into spirit of PE, and that basically looks at all the responsible learner behaviors that students should be demonstrating when they're in the physical activity environment. Supporting each other, it's looking for where you can pass, where you can move, positive comments, respecting strengths and weaknesses. Like again, in Adventure as an example, I have students who are daredevils and I have students who are petrified of heights, and that's fine. Everyone's at their own level of challenge, and we need to keep facilitating that being taught to our students so they can learn to appreciate what everybody brings to the table, because they all bring something.
Right, definitely. It's funny. Joe, you and I probably teach very similar. I do a lot of team building activities, adventure education, and I do that because you had your talk about the swimming unit, and you got these really good swimmers and these swimmers that are novice. When I do the team building activities, it really levels the playing field, and it allows my students who are very process-oriented to have a value in class. Because, I always tell my kids, I said, look who the NBA coaches are. They're not your superstars. They're your guys that played 7, 8, 9 years. They were the sixth man. They were the role players, but they were extremely, extremely intelligent. And so I want to show the value of that in physical education, and that's what I use my team building and adventure education activities for that. When I do that, is it gives them the opportunity to say, hey, these kids are the smart kids that really think through the strategies, the plans that will help us be successful. And so it allows that camaraderie. And then the second thing I use is growth mindset. Carol Dweck did just a phenomenal study on growth mindset versus fixed mindset. I invite everybody to check that out because it works great for physical education. And you got the kids coming in with a negative perception. I can't do this. Well, you can't because you haven't learned. Just like you haven't learned calculus. You don't tell your math teacher, I can't do this. You go in it with the mindset that you can learn it and that you can improve those skills. And that really helps my students with getting the fact that we're all out here to do my best. Some of us are going to do better than others, but we're all learning, and that helps with the responsibility and the behaviors of our kids, and they all come alongside each other. So my really good athletes say, hey, let me help you with the backstroke, or let me help you with something that a coach told me. And so there's a lot of sharing, and I don't find I have to worry about grading or evaluating students and their responsibility because I lay the groundwork at the very beginning. And so, Eric, I knew you had something you wanted to add. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. I do the team building activities at the beginning of the year whenever most of the kids are new. They don't know each other too well. And so just to get them to know each other. But beyond that, I like to do a character trait of the month. And so it might be honesty or loyalty or respect. And we'll focus in on those aspects each month. And so I'll make sure we talk about it each time I meet my students. And, well, how are you showing respect in this activity? Or how are you being loyal? Or how can you be honest? And just really focusing in on one thing a month has really helped my kids gain a deeper understanding of those topics or of those character traits.
Right, great. Yeah, having that intent, it helps students. It just really helps students. So, any other folks, do y'all have something you would like to add in closing? We've got just a few minutes left before we go off air.
For me, sorry, Joe, do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
For me, I just think it's so important that our students can see a learning journey taking place. So whether that is from the start to the end of a lesson or the start to the end of a unit. So it's not this go out and roll a ball out. It is see where their learning is and how that's going to implement them for those lifelong physical activity. Have they got something that they can go out there and enjoy? And I think what I've been sharing with Joe and William and others about solo taxonomy, and if people want more information, I recommend reading Pam Hook and Nicola Richards' book on solo taxonomy in PE, both book 1 and 2. It's just a language for learning, and I just think it's brilliant. So I think people should definitely look into it a lot more, especially for phys ed.
Definitely. Joe, did you have something to add?
Yeah, there's another question about a bit on the standards-based grading front about are standards weighted evenly or are they different? How do you determine what's more important? And again, this is US specific. It's going to depend on your curriculum. You are not, if you have a look at the grade level outcomes and the standards for each level, you are not going to hit every single one in a class. It's just impossible. So from there, it's like, what is your main focus? So for our core fitness for life class, for example, we have more focus on standard 3, that you are learning how to understanding fitness concepts and being able to apply them in a physical activity setting. Whereas in adventure ed, it's a lot more on standards 4 and 5. There's a responsibility piece, there's the challenge piece. So again, you look at your curriculum, you decide where your focuses are, and then go from there. That make sense?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Charlie.
Yeah, I just have one thing. I've only been teaching for 4 years, so one of the things that I've been kind of experiencing and having to stay steadfast with is the consistency in my approach, especially at the high school level, and understanding student expectation. When students walk in, depending on where you teach, when your students walk into the gym, they may have an expectation that they're essentially going to recess. And different ways, you have to figure out, build strong relationship with your students so you can figure out different ways to approach that. So when a student walks into English class, they have an expectation of the learning that's about to happen. And you have to create that in your gymnasium, on your fields, wherever it is that you teach physical education class, and remain consistent with it. Especially if you're a new teacher, like I'm still relatively new, and that's not the expectation on wherever it may be that you're teaching. Make sure you're consistent with your expectations. Make sure you continually assess. So when they walk into your gym, they have an expectation that they're going to have fun, that they're going to be active, but also that they're going to learn, like everyone else was saying, like Adam just said, that the continual learning process, whether it's in a lesson or in a unit, sometimes it's hard. But be consistent with it and make sure you set those expectations, and make sure those students know, and you that know me know I'm huge on this, make sure those students know that you care about not only them, but their learning process, and like William was saying before, that growth, when we talk about growth mindset, that you care about that, genuinely care about them and what it is they're learning and how it is that they're learning it.
Awesome. Well, as we were wrapping up, I told this to Charlie, and I tell this to a lot of folks. Most of us teach in a department, and not everybody in the department will have the same passion, will have the same philosophy that you do. And I just encourage you to stay the course, teach to your convictions, knowing that what's best for kids, even though everybody around you is not doing it. Stick to your guns. What's good for kids is good for kids, and you will find that the kids will really, really enjoy your class. And then you're going to find other kids, they're going to want to be in your class, and they're going to start talking to the other teachers. How come we don't do so-and-so like Mr. Bode does or Ms. Bailey does? And that starts the conversation to getting the rest of the folks in your department on board. I've been in a group where it's been roll out the balls. I take my kids outside and I separate them, and because that's just not good quality physical education. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I just want to encourage you to stand tall, because I did that. I was outcast for a year. Didn't speak to me, didn't do much of anything with me, but afterwards they started to figure out, wow, there's something different. My department chair came to me, what are you doing? When you take your kids away, what are you doing? I told them, hey, this is what I do. And she really liked it. She really wanted the department to adopt that. And so little by little, we created probably one of the better programs in our state. So just I encourage you to go back and watch this video and take out little pieces that you can implement. You can implement a Google form tomorrow. It's that simple. So does anybody have anything else? Because we're about ready to wrap it up.
We were just having a little side chat, and this came up on Voxer last night, and I know Joey Fife mentioned it at one of our presentations. I know it didn't come from him originally, but the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So we all need to make sure that we are, you know, just because somebody else is doing something that isn't best practice does not mean that we do that. We try and help, we try and share, we try and help people move forward as well. We keep our profession moving.
Exactly right. And you know, just this Phys Ed Summit alone is a testament to the professionalism that is in the physical education world, the connectedness of our community, and there are so many people out there that are willing to share through Google Docs, through Voxer, through Twitter. So I encourage you to continue or to get on. Voxer is now so big that we are starting to split up into smaller, more manageable groups. So if you're not on Voxer, please tweet out and say, hey, how can I get on Voxer? I promise you Justin Slider will hit you up in about 2 seconds and get that done.
Maybe we should have a high school PE Voxer group.
Well, actually, Adam,
yeah.
As you say that, the Phys Ed Summits that the four of us, or the five of us have been on, we are now going to change that to the Phys Ed high school chat, to where we'll be able to talk about some of the things that we're doing in our classes that elementary folks, they don't have as much of the problems that we have because of the nature of the student we have, as well as having large departments. So yeah, definitely, Adam, we're going to do that. All right. Well, I hope that everybody was able to get a lot of information, and that they'll be able to use it as simply as we've given it. And I hope that you'll take time to take the survey. Might get those nice prizes from Spark PE. Adam, Eric, Joe, Charlie, I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and your knowledge, and sharing with the community. I hope that anybody else needs information, you can tweet them, you can Voxer them. We are all here to hopefully make your situation a little better. And Adam said he's already started the Voxer group right after this, so he's ready to go. All right, everybody. I hope that you have a great rest of the weekend. And I'm Bill Bode, and I'm signing out.